Alrighty, we are in the car again, and I do not have access to a Bible that I can look at, so we will be paraphrasing from the verse that they're reading. And I know somewhere in the Old Testament, I think it is Exodus, it says the commandments are written on your hearts. The commandments are written on your hearts. That's what we're talking about today. I also just got a haircut. Comment down below. Did the barber do me right? Did she mess me up? I think she messed me up a bit. I said short. Now I feel like a gumball. That's not the point of the video. The commandments are written on your hearts. What does that mean? So, yesterday I was volunteering at the faith formation class at one of the faith formation class for grade 6 at my church. And we were talking about, I don't know how it got to the topic, but the kids started asking questions about when something is right or wrong. They were asking about stealing, like stealing a wallet. What if there's an ID in the wallet? Is that stealing if you found it? Is it stealing if you find a $20 bill? And then of course there are questions about death. You know, when is killing someone bad? One kid was asking, what about the military? One kid was asking, what if a cop shoots someone by accident, or someone? It's not funny. It's not funny. What if a cop shoots someone by accident? What if there's someone behind the cop? When is, killing right or wrong? What about the death penalty? And all these questions were kind of nitty gritty. And after I said to the kids, I was like, hey, if anyone wants to talk, because we kind of like brushed over some of them and tried to answer them. And then at the end, I called some of the kids. I was like, if anyone wants to keep asking these questions, I'll explain a way to think about them. And I use this metaphor, which I think is very apt for answering questions about the faith, the Christian faith. So I believe this metaphor is from Tolstoy, actually. I read like an excerpt from one of his, not book, but like little essay he wrote or whatever. And the metaphor is like this. If you're walking down a street, a dark street, you can be guided by two types of light. There can be lampposts that guide along the way, say like this area is bright, this area is bright. Or you can wear a lamp on your head, having a light that guides you and shows you the path, regardless of where you are, versus light only at certain lampposts. And this is sort of an apt metaphor for comparing following rules or following an ideal. Following rules can help. It says, again, I'm Catholic, catechism, it says, hey, like, abortion is wrong because of this. It is wrong in these circumstances. The death penalty is wrong because of this. Those are, lampposts. Again, even in the Christian faith, Jesus says, like, when adultery is right or wrong. It's pretty obvious, like, you shouldn't cheat on your wife. That's a lamppost. That's obvious. But the Bible, the catechism, whatever denomination you are, the Christian faith doesn't answer every question that one deals with when walking down the dark, desolate road of life here on earth. And there are certain questions, again, these kids were asking good ones, like, what if you find a wallet? What if there's no ID in it? What if there's an ID in it? What if you find $20 on the ground? What is too intimate before marriage for a couple, for a Christian couple? When is violence right? Should soldiers be using BB guns instead of real guns? Like these nitty-gritty questions aren't laid out answered. And we have to rely on almost ourselves and our intuitions and our guts, or this light that we always have with ourselves to guide us. Now there is one clear sort of directing, what's the right word? Like synthesis of the 10 Commandments, which Jesus gives in the Bible. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Love God and love neighbor. All the commandments, those are the greatest commandments, and they all boil down to that. So that's kind of like an additional layer of like almost like it's something you can check. Like, hey, if I'm choosing to, steal this wallet, bring this wallet into my home that I found with an ID, is that loving my neighbor? Is, being, very intimate with my girlfriend before marriage, is that loving God, loving God's creation, loving my neighbor, and respecting my girlfriend's purity? But you can sort of overlay, before we get to the other part about conscience, you can sort of overlay that great commandment, love God, love neighbor as self, over these questions. But beyond that too, we all have a gut, we all have a conscience, which sort of guides us with an internal right or wrong. The verse I kind of paraphrased at the start, the commandments are written on our hearts. That's what that's talking about. And I find it very interesting. I've talked about this a bit before. I like to journal. And at the end of the day, it's kind of funny because in the morning, or in the middle of the day, when you do stuff, I often find that you don't really realize how wrong it is until the end of the day. But when the day is done, when you're quiet, when you're sitting there in your room and thinking about what happened in the day, it's very difficult to lie and deceive yourself. I find that's where the honesty comes out and where your conscience really starts to speak. And that conscience, that internal sense of right or wrong, that gut feeling, that gut check when you do something right, when you do something wrong, you kind of feel it. That is from God. Like, God made us, God made every part of us. And especially that sort of internal compass that navigates between right or wrong, that helps us to live our lives, that is from God. And while that can be sort of a feeling that we dilute if we don't spend, a lot of times with ourselves, if we don't, not if we don't know ourselves, but if we're not able to quiet our minds at the end of the day, journaling, reflecting, doing examination of conscience, whatever it may be, if we're not doing that, we're not really going to access that internal sense of right or wrong. But it's there. And this internal conscience has been there through generations. People may agree exactly like what is your country, but no one really agrees you should be a traitor to your country. People agree that you should love your wife and not cheat on her, but sometimes people don't agree how many wives you should have. But there is sort of always been an underlying sense of this is right, this is wrong. It's never been looked favorably upon to run away in battle. Stuff like that. There's sort of always been an underlying level of human morality that our consciences guide us in that direction. So back to the metaphor. When we're walking down the street, again, these lampposts is stuff that maybe has been lived before, situations that have been lived before, or more obvious cases like, your neighbor has a Ferrari, you want to kill him to get the Ferrari. That's kind of obvious. But again, we will all encounter these nitty-gritty ethical decisions that can't be easily answered. It's a gray area. And the metaphor carrying over to having this is a bad video. Having the lamp over our heads is talking about our gut, our conscience, which is from God, and abiding by the great commandment to love God and love our neighbor. And following our gut and following our conscience and that great commandment are more so, or following, frankly, imitating Christ. That's an ideal that we can follow and we can hold with us to map out any situation or any choice that we have to make. So the answer will not always be obvious, it will not always be black and white, but by abiding by the ideal of Christ, the Christian life, loving God and loving neighbor, and listening to our gut, we can make the best decision we can make for the time. And the last thing I want to kind of touch on here is, this is why I believe it's so important of spending time alone and introspection. I was once asking one of my friends, very spiritual, very wise friend, about helping someone improve with their faith. Like, I have this buddy, I was talking to my friend, I have this buddy, he doesn't really seem to want to grow in his faith. And when I talked to my buddy about it, he sort of thinks that he's got it all, figured out in a sense, or that he's good. He's used, this guy I've talked to, he's used phrases like, oh, I'm good with God, like God's got me. I don't really have to worry. I'm a decent guy, I do better than some of my friends, stuff like that. And this buddy doesn't really feel the need of salvation, of the need for Jesus, which we all have once we recognize our sinners, but my buddy kind of struggled with that. So my wise friend was explaining that the issue, which he prescribed without really even knowing my friend, my wise spiritual friend for my buddy, he said what he needs to do is spend more time alone. Because anyone who tries to be good and spends enough time with themselves and with their thoughts realizes how bad of a person and how sinful they really are. Yet we can cover up our sinful nature to a certain degree by never spending time in reflection, never spending time with ourselves. If you spend 5 minutes with yourself at the end of the day, we can all find ways that we could have lived the day better. But if you're constantly, like my buddy I've talked to you about, scrolling, listening to music, constantly consuming content and constantly entertaining yourself, it's very difficult to ascertain the errors that you made if you're not reflecting. But that is a gift from God, that ability to reflect in our conscience. Because also, regardless of the fact that it guides us to the good, it also guides us to Jesus. It guides us to the need for salvation, because it points out the bad. It points out that we don't have it all figured out, that we aren't powerful enough, that we can't save ourselves, and that we are so weak, and that we will constantly stumble, regardless of really what it is. Porn, masturbation, power, greed, money, lust, wasting time on the internet, doom scrolling. That's me right now, scrolling YouTube Shorts for 30 minutes and not remembering a single thing. That's me. In realizing that, well, that may seem kind of negative, that prompts us to the need for salvation, and prompts us and opens more wider that God-shaped hole we have in all of us, and brings our awareness to it. And that is so powerful. So to wrap up the video, I'll probably title it something like, "When is stealing wrong?" or answering nitty-gritty questions about faith. Well, again, in the Catholic Church, there's a catechism, so some of these nitty-gritty, more modern questions have been answered and talked upon, like abortion, sex before marriage. There will always be questions and situations that aren't directly laid out. You know, you can't have sex before marriage. It's wise to think you can kiss your girlfriend on the lips. Can you kiss her on the neck? What about on her chest? What about her ear if she really likes it and turns her on? There's all these like very little ways to skin the cat. Again, I think the stealing one's a great example. Like, is it stealing if you see a $20 bill on the ground? Well, did it drop out of someone's wallet? Is it an abandoned warehouse? Where's the $20 bill? We can't always rely on other people or lamps to guide our way. There are times in life where we have to rely on our gut, on our conscience, and live by the light of Christ. People used to ask the question, what would Jesus do? Jesus would love God and love neighbor. And kind of using that to like check the box, like, okay, like, am I loving God and loving my neighbor by this choice? And do I feel like an internal like repulsion against this decision? That's sort of like what it means to carry a lamp on your head, or almost a compass when walking down the street, instead of relying on a lamppost to guide the way. We all have a conscience. The commandments are written on our hearts, and yeah, that's how we make these tough decisions in life. And we will all come across them, whether debating them for fun, like talking about politics, or something goes awry in your life and you have to make a big decision. It's not all going to be laid out, but hopefully this helps. Yeah, shoot me an email. My email's in the description. If anyone's been watching these, let me know anything you'd like to hear about. That's it. Take care. God bless.